Jacob Hayes stood by the window, daughter Ivy beside him, coloring quietly. The church social buzzed with families, whole families. He'd stopped belonging to that world 2 winters ago. Then Grace Porter crossed the room, hands trembling, and asked the impossible. The December cold seeped through the walls despite the fire blazing at the far end. Tables groaned under pies and casseroles. Laughter echoed off wood beams. But it didn't reach every corner. Jacob occupied one of those corners, content to let the noise wash past him. Ivy was 7 now. Dark hair like her mother's, eyes like his own. She drew horses in her notepad, tongue between her teeth in concentration. She didn't ask to play with the other children anymore. She'd learned, as he had. That grief set you apart. Grace Porter approached slowly. Her daughter, May, clung to her skirt 6 years old, blonde curls escaping a ribbon. Grace's hands clutched her coat front, knuckles white. "Mr. Hayes," she said quietly, "might I speak with you?" Jacob straightened. He knew Grace by sight, the widow everyone whispered about. Except she wasn't a widow. Her husband had left last spring, run off to California and never written. Somehow that was worse in the town's eyes. A widow earned sympathy. An abandoned wife earned judgment. "Ma'am," he said. Grace glanced at the crowded room, then back at him. Her voice dropped lower. Privately. They moved to the corner behind the coat rack. May stayed close, watching Jacob with wide eyes. Ivy looked up from her drawing, curious. Grace took a breath. Her words came rushed, desperate. "Mr. Hayes, I know I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to turn. But May, the school pageant is Friday, Christmas Eve service next week. All the other children have fathers in May. She stopped, swallowed hard. She needs a father." Grace said, "Even if it's just pretend, just for Christmas." Jacob stared. The request hung between them, absurd and heartbreaking. "You want me to pretend to be her father?" "Yes." Grace's eyes were desperate. "I know it's asking too much, but the town, they judge her for my mistakes. She's just a child. She deserves—" Her voice cracked. Jacob looked down at May. The girl watched him with something like hope beside him. Ivy had set down her crayons entirely. He knew this loneliness, had lived it every day since Sarah died. Saw it in his daughter's eyes when she watched other families, complete and whole. "You trust a stranger with something that tender?" he asked quietly. Grace met his gaze. "You're not a stranger, Mr. Hayes. You're the only man in this town who looks at me without judgment. A man's word is his bond. Out here, it's all we got." Jacob studied May's face again, then Ivy's. His daughter was watching him with an expression he hadn't seen in months' interest, maybe even excitement. "For Christmas," he said slowly. "Yes." Grace exhaled, relief and terror mixing. "Thank you. I thank you." May stepped forward shyly. "Will you come to my pageant?" Jacob knelt to her level. "I will." Ivy tugged his sleeve. "Papa, who's that girl?" May looked at Ivy. Something passed between them. Recognition, curiosity, the beginning of friendship. "I'm May," the girl said softly. Ivy smiled. It was the first real smile Jacob had seen on her face in weeks. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and loneliness. Grace poured coffee with hands steadier than Sunday, but not by much. Jacob sat at the small table, hat in his lap. Ivy and May had already found each other, spreading crayons across the floor near the fire. Their quiet giggles felt foreign in the space like birdsong in winter. "I appreciate you coming," Grace said, setting a cup before him. "Said I would." The cabin was modest but clean. Mended curtains, swept floors, everything in its place. A bare Christmas tree stood in the corner, waiting. Grace followed his gaze. "Haven't had the heart," she admitted. May asked, but doing it alone felt like admitting he's never coming back. Jacob wrapped his hands around the warm cup. What are the terms? Grace blinked. Terms of the arrangement. He kept his voice businesslike, easier that way. What do you need from me? She sat across from him, gathering her thoughts. The school pageant Friday evening, Christmas Eve service. Maybe one Sunday meal, so people see us together. Nothing more, nothing more. Her voice was firm. I'm not asking for, this is for May, so she doesn't feel different. So she has one Christmas that feels normal. Jacob nodded. Fair enough. Across the room, Ivy was showing May how to draw a horse. May laughed, delighted. The sound made Grace's eyes glisten. You lost someone, Grace said quietly. 2 years back. Jacob didn't elaborate, didn't need to. I'm sorry. He left last spring. Grace's fingers tightened around her cup. Said he was going to find work in California. Never wrote. Never sent money. Just gone. Worse than death. Some do say that. Her voice was bitter. As if I had any control over his leaving. As if his choices are my shame to carry. Jacob met her eyes. You didn't do anything wrong. Tell that to Mrs. Barrett. Grace gestured toward the window. She made sure everyone knows what kind of woman gets abandoned by her husband. Silence fell between them. Not uncomfortable. Exactly. Just heavy with shared understanding. Ivy's voice broke through. Can May come to our house? Jacob glanced at Grace. She looked uncertain. Maybe, he said carefully. We'll see. May appeared at the table, Ivy right behind her. Will you help us decorate the tree? Mr. Hayes, he looked at the bare pine in the corner, looked at Grace's hopeful, afraid face. Sometimes the kindest thing ain't words. It's just showing up. Saturday, he said. I'll come Saturday. We'll do it right. Grace's eyes filled. Thank you. And May clapped her hands. Ivy beamed as they prepared to leave. Jacob paused at the door. For the girls, he said. For the girls. Grace echoed. But as he walked home through the December cold, Ivy chattering about her new friend, Jacob wondered who he was really doing this for. The empty place in his chest felt a little less hollow than it had that morning. He told himself it meant nothing. He was lying. Jacob hung the garland while Ivy and May strung popcorn, their laughter like bells. Grace watched from the kitchen, something unguarded in her eyes. Saturday afternoon had arrived with pale sunlight and cold that bit deep. Jacob had come prepared pine boughs, ribbon, the box of ornaments from his own attic, things Sarah had loved, things he hadn't been able to look at for 2 years. But today, in this cabin with these people, they felt right again. Higher. Papa, Ivy called. The garland goes higher. He adjusted it, smiling despite himself. May watched him with open admiration. Grace moved between them with cookies and cider, her movements less guarded than before. How did your wife pass? Grace asked quietly, coming to stand beside him. If that's not too personal. Fever. Jacob's hand stilled on the ribbon. Came fast, took her faster. 1 week she was laughing in the kitchen. The next, he didn't finish. Grace touched his arm briefly. I'm sorry. Your husband. Jacob said. Why'd he really leave? Grace was quiet for a long moment. Said the ranch wasn't enough. Said I wasn't enough. Said California had opportunity and I had nothing but judgment and small thinking. Her voice hardened. Turns out the only small thing was his courage. You didn't fail, Jacob said. The town thinks I did. The town's wrong. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, recognition deeper than sympathy. Two people who'd learned that loss came in different shapes. but the loneliness tasted the same. "Mr. Hayes, I can't reach." May's voice broke the moment. Jacob turned, grateful for the interruption. May held an ornament. Stretching toward a high branch, he lifted her easily, settling her on his shoulder. "There you go." May placed the ornament, then wrapped her small arms around his head. "Thank you, Papa." The word hung in the air. Grace froze. Jacob's throat tightened. Ivy looked up, interested. "He's not your Papa, May," Grace said gently. "Mr. Hayes is just helping us." May's face fell. She climbed down, confused, but the damage or the truth was already spoken. A knock at the door startled them all. Grace opened it to find Mrs. Barrett on the step, eyes sharp with curiosity. "Grace," the woman said, peering past her into the cabin. "I was just passing and saw Mr. Hayes's wagon. Wanted to make sure everything was appropriate." Jacob stepped into view. "Ma'am," Mrs. Barrett's expression curdled. "Decorating together. How cozy." Grace stiffened. Jacob moved to the door, casual but deliberate. "Helping a neighbor prepare for Christmas," he said evenly. "Seems like the Christian thing to do. Unless you disagree." "Mrs. Barrett." The woman's lips pursed. "I didn't say didn't have to." Jacob's voice stayed level. "But if you've got concerns about Christian charity, I'm sure Pastor Williams would be happy to discuss it Sunday." Mrs. Barrett retreated, flustered. "Well, good day." Then she left quickly. Jacob closed the door. Grace stared at him. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Jacob met her eyes. "A man's word is his bond. Said I'd stay through Christmas. I will. Even if the town talks, let them." He reached for his coat. "I've lived through worse than gossip. The land don't lie. Neither should a man. We made a deal, I'm keeping it," as they prepared to leave. One ornament remained a star. May retrieved it carefully, brought it to Jacob. "You put it on, Papa," she said quietly, then added, "Please." Jacob looked at Grace. She nodded, tears in her eyes. He lifted May again. Together they set the star atop the tree. Light from the window caught it, filled the room with fractured gold. Outside, the first snow began to fall. Inside, something fragile and dangerous bloomed. Grace's hand trembled on Jacob's arm, half for show, half for steadiness. Every eye in the schoolhouse turned toward them. Friday evening. The pageant rehearsal had drawn the whole town. Families packed the benches, children fidgeting in makeshift costumes. The air smelled of pine and nervous excitement. Grace felt the stares like brands. Jacob's arm under her hand was steady, solid. He guided her to a bench near the middle, not hiding in back, not presuming the front. May and Ivy scampered ahead, Angel's wings already askew. "Breathe," Jacob murmured. Grace realized she'd been holding her breath. The rehearsal began. Mrs. Whitlow, the teacher, directed with patient firmness. Children stumbled through lines, forgot blocking, dissolved into giggles. Parents watched with indulgent smiles. May's turn came. She wore a shepherd's robe, carried a wooden staff. Her line was simple. "We have seen the star and followed it here." She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Her eyes widened. Panicked. She looked toward Grace, toward Jacob. Jacob stood slowly. His voice carried, gentle and sure. The shepherds were afraid too, sweetheart, but they were brave anyway. May's face steadied. She took a breath. "We have seen the star," she said clearly, "and followed it here." Applause rippled through the room. Grace's hand found Jacob's, squeezed briefly. He squeezed back. After rehearsal, families lingered. Some approached with genuine warmth. "Good to see you," Grace, and "Your May did wonderful." Others kept distance, whispers following in their wake. Mrs. Barrett materialized beside them. "Quite the performance," she said acidly. "From everyone." Jacob's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Come on," Grace murmured. "Let's go." They gathered the children and walked to the diner. It wasn't planned, but when Ivy asked if they could eat together, Jacob had nodded. So here they were, a family in the corner booth, visible to the whole town. Stares followed them. Grace felt each one, but the children were oblivious. Ivy showed May how to dunk bread in soup. May tried it, giggled when it dripped. The sound was pure joy. Jacob watched them, something soft in his expression. "They're good together." "They are." Grace agreed. How long's it been since she laughed like that? Grace's throat tightened. Too long. Their eyes met across the table. The pretense felt thinner now, more fragile. The walk home was quiet. Snow fell in soft curtains, lamplight glowing in windows they passed. Other families. Other warmth. May held Jacob's hand on one side, Ivy on the other. Grace walked beside them, separate but somehow part of the constellation, at her door. Jacob lingered. May and Ivy had already run inside, arguing happily about dolls. "This almost feels," Grace started. "Real," Jacob finished. The word hung between them, dangerous and true. "Coffee's weak, but it's honest like most folks ought to be. We're being honest where it counts." Snow fell between them, soft as possibility. Neither moved to break the moment. "Good night." Grace. First time he'd said her name with such tenderness. "Good night, Jacob." She watched him walk away, his daughter's hand in his. Watched until they disappeared into the snow and darkness. Inside, May was already asleep on the couch, spent from joy. Grace carried her to bed, tucked the quilts close, pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room. To God, maybe, to Jacob. Wherever he was, to whatever kindness had brought them to this impossible place, hammer-striking nail rhythm like heartbeat. Jacob worked the fence while Grace brought coffee, watched him move. Something domestic settling between them, dangerous and sweet. Wednesday afternoon. The fence had been listing since summer, Grace said. The roof leaked in 2 places. Small things she couldn't manage alone. Small things that added up to everything. Jacob had come without asking. Just arrived with tools and got to work. Now the fence stood straight. The roof no longer wept. And Grace stood in the yard with 2 cups of coffee, watching him like he was something rare. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "Needed doing." Jacob wiped his hands on his pants, accepted the cup. Besides, can't have May's roof leaking come January. The words settled between them casual on the surface, weighted beneath. May's roof. As if it were partly his concern now. They sat on the porch step. Cold bit through their coats, but the coffee was hot and the work was done. Satisfaction had its own warmth. "Tell me about her," Grace said quietly. "You're Sarah." Jacob was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. She was light. He finally said, "Everything about her was light. Her laugh, her step, the way she moved through a room. When she died, it was like someone blew out all the lamps at once." Grace's hand found his. "I'm sorry." "Tell me about him. Your Thomas." Grace's jaw tightened. "He was weak. I didn't know it at first, thought his dreams were ambition. Took me years to see they were just excuses. Excuses not to work hard, not to commit, not to be a man who stayed when things got difficult." "That's on him," Jacob said, "not you. The town doesn't see it that way." Grace's voice turned bitter. "They look at me and see failure. A woman who couldn't keep her husband home. Must be something wrong with me. They think. Jacob's hand tightened on hers. You survived. That's not failure. That's strength. Tears slipped down Grace's cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. I loved him, she whispered. God help me. I did. And he left anyway. I loved Sarah, Jacob said quietly. Still do, some ways. But Ivy, she's been lonely. I've kept us isolated, afraid to replace her mother. Afraid if I let anyone close, I'd be betraying Sarah's memory. He paused, throat working. Maybe that's its own failure. Maybe I've been hurting Ivy, trying not to hurt her. They sat in silence. The sun dropped behind the trees. Cold deepened. Inside, through the window, they could see the girls playing, May showing Ivy her doll collection, Ivy teaching May to braid hair. Their laughter drifted out, muffled but clear. Your mama smiles now, Ivy said, voice carrying. May nodded solemnly. Your papa does too. Grace's breath caught. Jacob heard it too, the children's wisdom, sharper than any adult's. Out here, you stand tall or get buried low. I choose standing beside you. Grace stood abruptly. Wait here. She went inside. Returned with a coat. Heavy wool. Worn leather collar. Men's size. This was Thomas's, she said. He left it behind. Didn't care enough to take it. She held it out. You should have it. He never deserved it. Jacob stood slowly, took the coat. The weight of it, the symbolism, pressed against his chest. Grace, please, she said. It should go to someone who'll honor it, someone who keeps his word. He put it on. It fit perfectly. She stepped closer, adjusted the collar. Her hands lingered at his shoulders. They stood like that, breathing the same cold air. The space between them charged with everything unspoken. Thank you, Jacob said finally. Thank you for staying. Me, that night, walking home. Jacob wore Thomas Porter's coat. It was heavy with trust and terror, and the weight of promises he hadn't quite made, but couldn't quite break. Ivy held his hand. Chattering about May and dolls and Christmas coming, Jacob barely heard her. All he could feel was Grace's hands on his shoulders, her eyes saying what her mouth wouldn't. This had stopped being pretend. Neither of them knew what to do about that. Pastor Williams's sermon cut like winter wind, honesty before God, truthfulness before men. Every word felt aimed at Grace's pew. Sunday morning. The sanctuary was crowded, air thick with judgment, and the smell of Sunday clothes pulled from trunks. Grace sat with May on one side, Jacob and Ivy on the other. A family, at least in appearance. She felt every eye. Pastor Williams was a good man. Usually. But today his sermon felt pointed. Grace's cheeks burned. Beside her, Jacob sat stone still, jaw tight. We must not deceive ourselves, the pastor continued, nor deceive others. For what profit is there in lies, even those told with good intention? May shifted closer to Grace. Confused by the tension, Ivy pressed against Jacob's side. The sermon finally ended. Hymns were sung. Benediction given. Then they had to face the door. Mrs. Barrett waited like a hawk. The moment Grace stepped into the aisle, the woman moved to block her path. Grace Porter, her voice carried deliberately. I think it's time we spoke plainly. Grace's stomach dropped. Mrs. Barrett. Lying to your child about her father. Using this man for respectability. Mrs. Barrett's eyes were hard, shameful. Grace, absolutely shameful. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Jacob stepped between them, slow and deliberate. She asked for help. I gave it. That's Christian charity. Last I checked. Mrs. Barrett, maybe you've forgotten what that looks like. The woman drew back, affronted. How dare you, how dare I? Jacob's voice stayed level, but steel ran through it. I dare because I see a woman trying to give her daughter one normal Christmas. I see a child who deserves better than this town's judgment. And I see a lot of folks who talk about Christian love on Sunday but practice something else entirely the other 6 days. Silence crashed through the sanctuary. Pastor Williams approached, hands raised. Now, we're leaving, Jacob said. He took Grace's arm gently. Come on. They walked out together, children hurrying behind. Grace's vision blurred with tears. She held them until they reached her cabin. Then she collapsed. Jacob caught her, guided her to a chair. May and Ivy hovered, frightened. I've made it worse, Grace sobbed. For you. For Ivy. This was selfish. You should go. Jacob knelt before her. Grace. No. She pulled away. Mrs. Barrett's right. I'm lying to May, using you, putting your reputation at risk. This was a mistake. Were you... Jacob's voice was quiet. Using me, I don't know anymore. Grace buried her face in her hands. I don't know what's real. May's small voice broke through. Is Mr. Hayes leaving? The question hung like a knife. Ivy stepped forward, fierce. My papa keeps promises, but even Ivy's voice wavered. Their fear, both children's fear, cracked something in Jacob. He stood, grabbed his coat. I need to think, he said roughly. I'll be back. He left before Grace could respond. The night was bitter cold. Snow fell in sheets, the kind that buried everything by morning. Jacob walked without direction, coat pulled tight. He found himself at the cemetery. Sarah's grave was covered in snow. He brushed it clear with numb hands, knelt in the frozen dirt. Would you want me to stop living? Sarah! His voice cracked. Would you want Ivy to grow up alone because I'm too afraid to? The wind answered, or didn't. But maybe silence was permission. Maybe Sarah's love had been big enough to want him happy, even without her. Jacob stood, turned back toward town. Home ain't a place. It's the people you'd ride through hell to get back to. I ain't leaving. Grace. When he reached Grace's cabin, she stood at the window. Lamplight surrounded her like prayer. Relief flooded her face when she saw him. He hadn't left. That had to mean something. The town had fractured cleanly those who believed in mercy and those who believed in judgment. Jacob and Grace stood in the break, children holding the pieces. Christmas week arrived with brutal cold. 4 days until Christmas Eve. 4 days until the pageant and service that would put them on display again. Some families had withdrawn invitations, cold shoulders at the mercantile, whispers that cut sharper than wind. Jacob and Grace barely spoke now. Self-protection. Maybe. But the silence hurt worse than gossip. May asked Grace one morning, voice small. Did we do something wrong? Is that why people are mean? Grace had no answer. Ivy cried alone in her room. Jacob heard but didn't know how to help. Their children's heartbreak shattered what was left of adult defenses. Wednesday night. Jacob couldn't sleep. He dressed, walked through snow to the church. The door was open, always was. He slipped inside. Grace was already there. She knelt before the altar, head bowed. Jacob saw her shoulders shake. He sat in the pew behind her, said nothing. After a long time, Grace spoke without turning. I'm afraid, I know, of what they'll say, what they already say, of dragging you down with me. I know, Jacob said again. Grace turned finally. Tears tracked her face. You should go. Take Ivy somewhere people won't judge her for my mistakes. Is that what you want? It's what's right. Jacob moved to sit beside her. I'm afraid too, he admitted, but more afraid of walking away. Grace's breath hitched. This stopped being pretend for me, Jacob continued, words coming slow but sure. Somewhere between the coffee and the Christmas tree. Somewhere when May called me Papa and it didn't hurt. It healed. Jacob. I know what I'm asking, he said. I know what the town will say. But I'm done pretending. Grace. I'm done protecting myself while you and May suffer. The children. The children already know. Jacob's voice gentled. They knew before we did. Grace covered her face. For me, too. God help me. It stopped being pretend for me, too. Then what are we doing? Jacob took her hands, pulled them gently from her face. Why are we fighting this? Because it's fast? Because it's complicated? Because we're afraid. Jacob finished. I spent 2 years afraid. Kept myself and Ivy locked away because opening my heart again felt like betraying Sarah. But you know what? I think she'd hate what I became. I think she'd want Ivy to laugh again. To have a mother. To have a family. Sometimes the bravest thing is to stay. And out here, families who shows up when the snow's deep and the fire's low. You asked me to pretend for Christmas. Jacob said, I'm done pretending. I'm showing up. Grace. Not for Christmas. For good. If you'll have me. The town can talk. Let them. Grace searched his face, found only truth. The children. Already love each other. Already love us. Jacob's thumb brushed her knuckles. We'd just be making honest what they already feel. Tears spilled fresh. I'm afraid. Me too. But I'm here anyway. Grace's hands tightened on his. They sat in the empty church, hands clasped, future uncertain but no longer alone. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve. Grace whispered. I know. They'll all be watching. Let them. She leaned into him. Jacob's arm came around her shoulders' first embrace. Awkward and perfect. For good, she asked, voice muffled against his coat. For good. Outside. Snow fell. Inside. Candlelight flickered on the altar. 2 broken people choosing courage over fear. 2 families becoming one. The church glowed with candlelight. But Jacob felt the cold stares more than the warmth. Grace's hand trembled in his. Ivy and May walked between them, small shields of innocence. Christmas Eve. The sanctuary was packed. Every family in town had come, whether from tradition or curiosity. Pine boughs decorated the altar. Candles waited to be lit. Children fidgeted in costume backstage. Jacob guided Grace to their pew, not hiding in back, not presuming the front, right in the middle, visible to all. Some faces showed genuine warmth. Elder Doyle nodded. His wife smiled. Others were stone. Mrs. Barrett sat rigid, disapproval radiating. Pastor Williams took the pulpit. Christmas Eve, he began. We remember a family, not perfect, not conventional by society's standards, but chosen by God. A carpenter who wasn't the biological father. A young woman judged by her town. A child born in questionable circumstances. His eyes swept the congregation, lingered briefly on Jacob and Grace. Yet God called them family, and through them, brought salvation. Grace's hand tightened on Jacob's. The children's pageant began. Simple, sweet, imperfect. Shepherds forgot lines. Angels' wings drooped. The wise men argued over who carried which gift. May's moment came. Same line as before. We have seen the star and followed it here. She looked out at the congregation, found Jacob, found Grace. We have seen the star, she said clearly, and followed it here. Then she paused, unscripted. And it brought us home. Applause rippled through the sanctuary. The pageant ended. Children spilled from the stage. May and Ivy ran together, not to individual parents, but to both. Mama, Papa, May cried, throwing herself at Jacob. The word echoed. Every eye turned. This was the moment. Public declaration or public shame? Jacob lifted May, settled her on his hip. Ivy pressed against Grace's side. They stood together, a family, however unconventional. Pastor Williams raised his hands. Now we light our family candles. Each household, come forward. Families rose, approached the altar, lit candles from the Christ candle, returned to their pews. Jacob and Grace stood, walked forward together, children between them. Jacob struck the match. Grace held the candle. Their hands touched as they lit it together. A family, witnessed by the whole congregation, they turned, walked back to their pew. Elder Doyle stood. His voice carried through the silence. Jacob Hayes has done right by this woman and these children. He's shown more Christian charity than most of us combined. Anyone says otherwise answers to me. Others nodded, murmured agreement. Pastor Williams added gently, sometimes God's family looks different than we expect, but it's family all the same. Mrs. Barrett sat silent, shamed. The service ended. Families filed out, offering congratulations, warm words, some still cold, but fewer than before. On the church steps, snow fell soft. Stars emerged between clouds. Grace trembled, emotion overwhelming. Is this real now? She whispered, or still pretending. Jacob took both her hands. First time truly, no performance. It's real, he said. Has been since you asked me to stay. Maybe before. Tears froze on her cheeks. The land don't lie. Neither should a man. What we're seeing here is truth, the kind that matters. Merry Christmas. Grace. Merry Christmas home. Behind them, Ivy and May held hands, watching the stars. A family, forged not by blood, but by choice. By courage, by love brave enough to show up. Christmas dawn came quiet. Snow had stopped. Inside the cabin, firelight danced across sleeping faces, 2 children curled together, 2 adults watching over them. Jacob made coffee. Movements familiar now. Grace joined him. Shawl wrapped close. They sat at the table, shoulders touching. No words needed. Outside, the world was silver and still. Inside, warmth layered itself fire. Lamplight. Presence. Peace settled like snow. May stirred first. Sat up with a gasp. It's Christmas! Ivy woke instantly. Presents. They tumbled from their shared bed, racing to the tree. Stockings hung from the mantel, 4 now, not 2. Simple gifts waited beneath pine branches. Carved horses from Jacob, each one perfect. Knitted scarves from Grace, soft and warm. Penny candy, small treasures wrapped in brown paper. But the real gift was clear in the way May held Jacob's hand, the way Ivy curled against Grace's side, the way they sat together, whole. We're a family now, May asked, needing to hear it confirmed. We are, Grace said, voice thick. Ivy beamed. Forever. Jacob ruffled her hair. Forever. A knock at the door interrupted. Grace opened it to find Elder Doyle and his wife, arms full of wrapped bread and pies. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Doyle said warmly. Thought you might need these. More neighbors came. The pastor and his wife, even Mrs. Barrett, carrying cookies, no note. But presents enough. The cabin filled with community, with acceptance, with the beginning of healing. By evening, Grace's small home had contained half the town. Now it was quiet again. Just the 4 of them. They sat for Christmas supper, simple but abundant. Roasted chicken, potatoes, bread still warm. Jacob offered Grace, voice steady. Lord, Thank you for shelter that became home, for strangers who became family, for Christmas that taught us love needs no permission but courage, for Grace who was brave enough to ask, for these children who were wise enough to know. Amen. Men. They echoed together. One voice, 4 hearts. Sometimes the bravest thing is to stay. And the holiest thing is to love again. After supper, May and Ivy cleared plates, chattering about dolls and horses and next Christmas already. Grace watched them, eyes wet with gratitude. Jacob's hand covered hers across the table. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For saying yes, for staying, for being real. Thank you for asking, for being brave enough. The children returned, demanding stories. They settled by the fire, Grace in the rocking chair, Jacob on the floor, girls between them. The story was familiar, shepherds and stars and a baby born in impossible circumstances. But tonight it sounded different. Tonight it sounded like their own story. Later, after children slept, Jacob and Grace stood at the window. Snow glowed silver under moonlight. His arm circled her waist first, true embrace. Long overdue. Merry Christmas, he murmured. Merry Christmas home. They stood like that, watching the night behind them. The lamp burned steady. Christmas star atop the tree caught its light, scattered gold across the walls. 4 stockings hung from the mantel. 4 plates on the table. 4 hearts beating in rhythm. Outside, winter still held the world, but inside, spring was already growing patient. Certain. Sure. Jacob pressed a kiss to Grace's temple. She leaned into him. Finally. Fully home. The children would wake tomorrow with questions. The town would still have whispers. Life would bring challenges neither could predict, but they would face it together. A carpenter and a widow. 2 children who found each other. A family forged in courage. Blessed by Christmas. Made holy by choice. The lamp flickered once, then steadied,